And after the high-tech handshake event at White House where Prime Minister met the top CEOs, he was hosted by Vice President of the United States Kamala Harris as well as US Secretary of State Antony Blinken for the state luncheon. Raising a toast to Indo-US friendship, Prime Minister said that the partnership between the two countries was a promise over the horizon which has no limits. He said that the two countries had come a long way in the last 9 years.
2014 में मेरी यात्रा के समय मेरे प्रिय मित्र राष्ट्रपति बाइडेन भी यहां स्टेट डिपार्टमेंट में मेरे साथ थे। उस समय उन्होंने भारत और अमेरिका की साझेदारी को अ प्रॉमिस ओवर द होराइजन बताया था। 9 वर्षों के इस अंतराल में हमने बहुत ही लंबी और खूबसूरत यात्रा की है। धरती हो या आकाश, समुद्र की गहराइयां हो या अंतरिक्ष की ऊंचाइयां, भारत और अमेरिका एक साथ काम करते दिख रहे हैं। सही मायने में प्रॉमिस ओवर द होराइजन आज न तो प्रॉमिस तक सीमित है और न ही होराइजन तक सीमित है।
US Vice President Kamala Harris acknowledged the growing heft of Indian Prime Minister and said that India's impact can now be felt worldwide. She said that the ties between the two countries are only strengthening further.
India's global engagement has not only been to the benefit of the people of India, but also to the benefit of the people of the United States and people around the world. So, Mr. Prime Minister, thank you for your role of leadership to help India emerge as a global power in the 21st century. You have helped to reinvigorate the Quad. Your leadership of the G20 is making new strides on climate finance, and you have been a proponent of international institutions and global solutions to global challenges. And as a point of personal privilege, as chair of the National Space Council, I thank you for your leadership in space and for our joint work on an Earth science satellite, which will help us address the climate crisis. And during this trip, our countries have launched new areas of cooperation, from artificial intelligence to semiconductors. As we look toward the future, the United States and India, the world's oldest and largest democracies, instinctively turn to each other and are increasingly aligned.
So far, it has been nothing but a series of glowing testimonials coming in for India as well as Indian Prime Minister, whether it is the President of United States or is it the US Secretary of State or, as you heard just now, Kamala Harris, Vice President of the United States. But the man who probably made all this possible, US Congressman Sri Thanedar, he is, remember, the Indian American who escorted Prime Minister to US Congress as well as wrote the letter to Speaker McCarthy to invite the Prime Minister. Sir, my first question to you, what made you think of that?
Well, India and United States, this relationship is very, very important, not only for the people of India, but also for the people of the United States. This collaboration will help American businesses to grow and create more employment in America. So I think it's important that these two countries should come together, build a strong, lasting, and trusting bond so that we can advance in terms of manufacturing, in terms of space, defense. And I'm seeing a lot of collaboration. Many of the conversations we have had with Prime Minister Modi, there is a meeting of mind in terms of taking our relationship to a higher level so that people of both the countries will benefit.
Right. Do you think that from whatever we have seen so far, both the countries have benefited?
Yes,
equally?
So far equally, and we will see more of such collaboration. Look, we have seen aggression from China. China has used unfair trade practices. China has been aggressor military-wise on the northern border of India. And through the joint friendship between US and India, we can stop this Chinese aggression. We can stop China using unfair labor practices. We can stop China's attack on the environment. So there is a lot that we can do to have better trade relations. So far our relationship is good, but it can be much better. And that's what I'm hoping this visit by the Indian Prime Minister to the United States will do. And Prime Minister Modi, in all of his conversations, I had a chance to talk with him, spend some time with him, and he is very, very keen on taking this relationship between these two great countries to a new height.
Right. Peter Kuznick, who is an author, is also joining us on the broadcast. Sir, what is the U.S. media making of this visit?
I think the U.S. media, U.S. media primarily...
Sir, that question is for Peter Kuznick. I'll come back to you on that.
Sorry.
But let me just get his opinion in.
The images on the U.S. media are overwhelmingly positive. This has been a love fest between the U.S. leaders and Prime Minister Modi. All the words are the right words. They're celebrating democracy. They're celebrating diversity. They're celebrating trade. But the U.S. media is also stressing two other themes. One is that this is in the context of worsening relations between the United States and China. And the United States wants to pull India closer in order to fortify American forces in Asia against China. Number two, the U.S. is not happy with India's role in terms of the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And so they're hoping that India will fall more in the U.S. NATO camp and cut back on some of its economic ties with Ukraine. And the third theme that the U.S. media is raising is that Biden talks so much about democracy, but Modi is, if anything, a flawed Democrat. And there are deep problems with Indian democracy. And
but
so
sir,
another theme, yes?
Yeah, because you mentioned the democracy, but isn't that question, hasn't that question already been addressed by Biden himself when he says that the overwhelming respect for another country comes from the core values that are being followed by India as well? Does that question still remain unanswered for some sections in the US?
Yes, the lead editorial in the New York Times yesterday was about the hypocrisy. Biden is being accused, even by members of the Democratic Party, of being a hypocrite. Several Democrats have actually boycotted some of these meetings because they think that the United States should at least be critical of the way Modi has cracked down on Muslims, on the press, on NGOs, on opposition politicians. That doesn't mean the U.S. and India shouldn't be friends, but both countries are facing serious problems with their own democracy. And that's another theme.
But Mr. Thanedar, let me bring you in on that. You were there inside the US Congress. You escorted the Prime Minister. We saw images coming out where this very same congressman who had earlier written a letter and had threatened boycott of Prime Minister's address were seen standing and giving standing ovations to the Prime Minister as he addressed the joint session. Has there been a change of stance there, or is it still the same as Mr. Peter is pointing out?
Well, all of the Indian American Congress people joined me in escorting the Prime Minister to the United States House. All of the Indian American, what we call the Samosa Caucus, all of the Indian American congressmen and congresswomen were there at the state dinner as well. So I think we are all together, all of the United States Congress people of Indian origin, all of them attended, all of them joined me in escorting Prime Minister Modi to the US Congress. All of them joined me on the state dinner that was hosted by President Biden. So I think there is no disagreement that I see that we all stand united in welcoming Prime Minister Modi to the United States, and it looks like we all stand united that we all want a long-term, strong relationship with the United States.
Mr. Kuznick, the bitterness that you speak about, I have the front page of at least 5 newspapers in the United States in front of me. The headlines say Modi hails partnership of democracies. The New York Times also for Modi's visit, abundant pomp and no friction. Washington Post says Biden defends India's democracy as Modi visits. Then there is the Wall Street Journal, the newspaper that made headlines for that question that was asked to the Prime Minister about the treatment of freedom of speech as well as minority rights in India. Where does your sense of dissatisfaction or allegations of duplicity against the Democrat come from? Because the newspaper headline certainly doesn't suggest so.
Well, if you looked at the newspaper headline in the Washington Post the day before, it was much more explicit, both about that. The reason why the United States wants Modi here right now is because of the growing tensions with China. There's more and more discussion globally now, but especially in the United States, that if we don't reverse the relationship, we could have confrontations militarily with China in the very near future. The United States has been shoring up its alliances with South Korea, with Japan, with the Philippines, with Australia, and now it wants to bring India in also. But Modi has been very, very smart about this. He has wanted to maintain Indian neutrality and Indian independence. He has not gone along with the United States' needs in that regard. India has its own strategy. India wants economic investments. India wants more trade. India wants more manufacturing. What the United States has seen with the fighting in Ukraine is that the United States has not been able to deliver the weapons that Ukraine needs or the weapons that Taiwan needs. The Europeans have not been able to make that up. What the U.S. is looking for is a redistribution of supply chains, but also a redistribution of arms manufacturing. And part of this agreement is for India to produce more arms, to produce jet engines, to produce other military means. And so I love to see the increased trade between India and the United States, but I want to see India play a leading role, which it is capable of, as a force for peace in the world. The world is getting more dangerous, not less dangerous, and we need leaders who have a vision who can actually bring the world together.
Right. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining me on the broadcast. As PM said, it's not just about India gaining out of the US, but Biden himself admitted we are also generating more than 1 million jobs from our ties. And there are several other transfers that are also taking place, which make us an equal partner on that table of negotiations. But moving on, and